Battleground Mobile India, BGMI as it's popularly called, is now officially off Google Play. It's off Apple's App Store. That's following a government's directive to ban the game. So much so, the Minister of State for IT, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, had recently said, how is it that a new version of PUBG is available? I'm paraphrasing there, but that's what he had alluded to. And after that, we have seen the popular game going off the Apple App Store as well as Google Play. We've of course seen this trend since 2020, where the government became quite clear that apps, games which might be, invading your phone, reading your phone, sending information outside of India would be not allowed. In fact, first the belief was that is it only going to be for Chinese apps? But then we also saw PUBG. Built in South Korea, however, published and distributed by China's Tencent. What exactly is going on? And like I said, Battleground Mobile India, extremely popular. The publisher Krafton, in fact, has invested more than $200 million in India of late. Where does this leave the e-gaming, esports industry, which according to Mukesh Ambani and Satya Nadella, should one day, very soon, become bigger than commerce as well as television and music in the country? That's exactly what I'm going to be discussing with Vishal of Goqii, also joining us, well-known lawyer, Apar, Gupta. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us here on Startup Central. Vishal, I'll come to you first. Your views are very well known when it comes to this. I remember in 2020, you talked about how the Indian ecosystem was going to come up with its own games. You were talking of roping in Akshay Kumar and all of that as well. But this, when you have Krafton from South Korea, so immensely popular, Indians also taking to it, ad hocly removed from the Play Store and Google Play. What is the largest signal that it sends to gamers, investors, and the community?
So I think, first of all, we should know that PUBG and BGMI, there's a lot of smokes and mirrors here, right? It's not as simple as saying that BGMI is not PUBG and vice versa. We all knew what happened in 2021. All the Tencent employees were transferred to Krafton. We also know that the file names and everything was same. I think they just changed the name of the game and launched it in India. So I think there was clearly, and there was a lot of talk around, is this the same wine in a new bottle? And I think, but for the last year or so, the game has been in the market. PUBG clearly has been very, very popular in India, and its new avatar and new name, BGMI, continues to be popular. Of course, I am also not very sure on what has happened since then, between the reasons on why the government has looked to ban it now. But I would say that it certainly is going back to the same connection between these things. Having said that, I think the bigger challenge which we need to deal as an industry is that the entire ecosystem is works on games. There is esports. There are multiple tournaments happening. So I think my only point here is that the government should be much more clearer on its directions, because it just leaves a little bit of uncertainty on what is going on. And as far as this particular case is concerned, I think it was a matter of deception, and maybe they have just got caught now.
Okay, like you're saying, maybe it was old wine in a new bottle, but whichever way you look at it, the government of India since 2020 has banned nearly 270 apps, most of them having links with China, including the immensely popular TikTok. If you look at Battleground Mobile India, BGMI as it's called, has more than 100 million users already in the country. With that apart, I'm going to come to you. Opening comments. I think the government's been quite vocal about it. It's not going to allow apps, particularly from China, that might be reading Indians' data, might be duplicating its data and also sending it outside. This is Vishal's definition. Is it old wine in a new bottle? The relaunch that we had seen of PUBG as BGMI.
So I think Vishal has made a very important point, and I'd like to explain why we don't have a great degree of certainty, and we actually don't know the reasons why these app bans are happening. It's because the legal provision which is used is Section 69A of the Information Technology Act, and there are certain rules made under it. And as per those rules, the government's own interpretation is it doesn't need to disclose the legal order which would contain the reasons why a specific application is blocked. At the same point in time, the government does put out certain press releases at certain points in time, but it's no substitute for a legal order by itself. And this does impact certainty, clear assessment, and greater confidence by a lot of people who will share these concerns about data protection, privacy, cybersecurity, and all of us being very patriotic Indians by itself. Here, I'd like to just indicate that the same power is quite often used also to block things which are expressing dissent, which are within the borders and within the boundaries of a democratic discourse, such as Twitter handles of the Kisan Ekta Manch or reports on assessments of internet freedom in India by Freedom House itself. So it's quite a contentious provision. And just like to end this by saying that if there are issues which are touching for geostrategic importance on data protection, cybersecurity, they need to be sufficiently staffed, resourced, regulatory bodies, and it should be done with a greater degree of transparency to have public trust.
Yeah, sorry, I was saying that only one point I want to add here is that if you look at most of the other apps which were banned, TikTok did not come in India under a new name like Lick Lock or whatever, right? I mean, the point with BGMI specifically was I think it was openly mocking Indian law and Indian lawmakers, right, by uh, renaming the files, etc. And while we thought it was above board and everybody did, I think the question really is this is also somewhere trying to show that people can't take advantage of certain loopholes which they could have possibly found. Because if this is what happens with BGMI and PUBG, then every banned app could potentially launch with through a different country and a different name, and the whole thing can be futile.
And we've seen that in the past. Remember when Garena 5 Free was launched, we saw Garena Free Fire Max, right? So let's see. So clearly the government is also trying to be vigilant. But I want to go back to the point, the pertinent point that you both raised, that we'd never know why an app is banned. There is no direction which says, all Chinese apps. Even when, regulations came out about trade, about transfer of money, it's always been about neighboring countries. And with that, I'll come to you now, Apar. All of this came to limelight again when we heard about the teenager boy last month killing his mother with his father's licensed gun because she told him not to, reportedly and allegedly told him not to play BGMI anymore. He was upset about it. Now, we've also seen in China how it has cracked down on e-gaming, calling it spiritual opium. Do you think it's time that the government also says what its stance is when it comes to e-gaming? Is it spiritual opium? Is it just Chinese games which are not going to be allowed? Is it going to be games of violence? Is it going to be all kinds of games? Because at the same time, business models are also being wiped out with what the GST Council is deliberating with the 28% levy.
So, gaming has a great potential, as Vishal will know very well, in terms of being a driver for innovation and growth for economic sector, but it's also a learning and education tool. A lot of people who are introverted, young people in India, quite often form very strong bonds. Yet at the same point in time, because it's such a powerful technology, the UI and the system design by itself, the gameplay by itself can incentivize certain features by itself, which can cause a level of addiction, which essentially will be detrimental to the growth of people who may be minors. So all of these topics by themselves are complex. They can't be handled with a blunt instrument of blocking a application by itself. What is needed is self-regulatory norms by the industry, which it's walking towards in India. But at the same time, it needs to be supported by government dialogue and also greater academic examination. What are the impacts of gaming? We cannot demonize gaming by itself, just as we can't demonize social media. They enable human function. But I think the regulatory frameworks which we need to craft, that kind of conversation right now needs to be encouraged to a greater level. Europe is already stepping towards it, and we don't need to look to China. We can make a much better assessment rather than coming in with those kind of harsh timetables which have been imposed in China.
And let me come to you, Vishal. You had a startup. You were in gaming. You sold that very successfully to UTV. You've been involved with gaming and innovation for many years now. Which is the way to go? Because right now it just seems so ad hoc. In Parliament, a question is raised: What is the government doing? PUBG has resurfaced under a new name. We a statement, a reply by Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar. Within days, BGMI is being called off. Do you think it's time that the government also decides, yes, gaming is bad, gaming like this will be allowed, violence won't be allowed, these kind of games will be allowed?
So I think people are confusing the BGMI and PUBG issue with the larger gaming, the GST. That's a different discussion. I think in this case, the way I look at it is that there is a company.
No. What I meant to say was, I'm clubbing it all together. No, Vishal, I take your point. I'm sorry, I should have phrased my question better. I interject you so rudely there. What I'm trying to get at is that one gets so many mixed signals from the same government when it comes to gaming, right? The same Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar is meeting gamers. He's meeting with gaming startups. The GST Council is headed by the finance minister, and it is looking at a higher tax. You have certain state governments which want to ban gaming. Then you have the central government which, time and again removes games. My point is, India as a country seems to have very mixed emotions when it comes to gaming.
No, actually, the emotions are not mixed. I think there is a huge challenge around the real money gaming scene, and you know my views around that, right? So real money gaming games which involve money, gambling, betting, wagering, skill gaming, that is clearly, I support a ban on that totally in this country. I've been vocal about it, or some kind of strict regulation so that people above a certain age can access it, to create it a safe environment. However, talking about the BGMI issue, I think this is a case where somehow they slipped through the system and decepted a lot of lawmakers. I would say that this is not different. I think we were actually surprised when BGMI itself launched. In fact, their launch was delayed by several times with a new name, and all kinds of things happened. So I was actually in a way surprised that how could somebody pull this off in a country like India. So I would just say that maybe now the government caught it, because it must have just fallen through the cracks, because it is the elephant in the room. BGMI is PUBG, so let's not fool ourselves by thinking that suddenly in 2 months they created a new game from the scratch and they launched it in India. That is not possible. A game development takes a long time. It's a big process, and we've been developing now 4G for almost 1.5 years. So 4G itself will be maybe ready by next year in terms of a decent gameplay. So that's the kind of time it takes. So I think in this case, I think the government finally caught them.
So, Apar, how can the government stay vigilant? And you've been talking about lack of clarity from the government when it takes these decisions, which you have described as ad hoc. I read previous orders which have gone to startups, have gone to apps and publisher of games, where they don't give a reason, but they give you almost, they ask for answers, and the questions are almost, 60 or 70 questions. Does it read the phone? Does it duplicate the same? Questions like that. There are almost 60, 70 questions like that are asked, and then it's up to you to guess.
Nanda, a lot of this is happening because let's just look at the enormity of the task. We have close to 600 million active internet users, at least in India, right? And the government last year, as per RTI reply, blocked about 6,096 URLs, 347 applications. The legal orders behind them are not open to public scrutiny, but this aggregate data is out there. Now, the regulatory way to achieve what the government may want to do is as follows. Number one, what is the public problem which is for the individual harm which is caused due to an internet application, right? Number two is independent authority constituted to perform the function in which it can query evidence, technically analyze where the servers are located, where the data is going, if it's a data export problem, if there's addictiveness problem, etc., it can look at it. And then proportional penalties. It asks for that application to be restructured, for the corporate holding to be restructured, for certain features to be changed, for monetary penalties to be levied rather than straight away bans. And I think in the greater growth of the sector by itself, whether it may be digital gaming or anything which touches upon digital technology, these frameworks still have to be built. And we need to build our frameworks on policy, on governance to ensure that that $1 trillion target which we are chasing in the digital economy even grows even broader to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 in the decades to come. So we need to set up these systems of governance, and they're lacking. The power which has been used is actually a power for blocking, which is under the Information Technology Act. It's close to 20 years old. It doesn't suit the internet of today. It doesn't suit the startups or the users of today.
Yes, we certainly need that IT Act to be overhauled. We've been hearing about it for a very long time. And, as we start winding down this conversation, Vishal, that's a very pertinent point that Apar has also made. Straight away ban, or, at least try penalties first?
So I would say that, in the case of BGMI and PUBG, there were several instances where users were seeing Chinese language coming into BGMI. There were several instances where people had put out screenshots of how Chinese servers were still being pinged from BGMI. So the point really is that as far as BGMI specifically is concerned, I'm sure the government knows more than what we know to do what it has done. Having said that, on a separate note, clearly there needs to be an overall guidelines. I know there's a data protection law and data security law which is under development. So I would say once we know exactly, for example, all our servers are in India, we store our data in India, but still the clarity is not there on can we store in Singapore, can we store in America. So I think those kind of things need to be clarified, and I think once we have a broader data protection, data privacy law, this will become more clearer. And I think the other big thing clearly is the government needs to now come back on gaming as a whole. There is so many challenges in the gaming industry. As a games company, Encore Games, we are suffering because there is a GST confusion. There is a confusion of whether it is skill gaming and whether it is gambling. Then there is a confusion around what is happening. So right now, gaming industry has become a minefield, and we need the help of the government to clear it so that we can all play and enjoy our games.
That's right, and I think the other problem will then be that even if you have the central government doing it, what about the state governments? Because we do know what happens over there as well. But I think both our panelists are in agreement there. More clarity needed by the government, more clarity needed from the government. What it thinks of the gaming sector at large. Till then, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you were hooked to BGMI, no choice there. It's going off the Google Play. It's gone off the Apple App Store as well. Maybe you can try 4G. Vishal telling us and giving us breaking news there that it will finally be ready sometime next year. I'd like to thank both of our panelists for joining us today on the show.
Thank you so much.